Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of our Friday YouTube tutorials. My name is Milica Paranosic, and I will be posting these YouTube tutorials once a week, hopefully, and they are answers to your questions. The questions that you might have on the topic of music technology, film scoring, and general composition tools and tips. These questions are a result of our 3-month Zoom explorations, workshops, teaching sessions, conversations, etc. And the answers are mainly from my own experience. So there might be people who do things differently than I do. So a lot of these things are not necessarily a rule. I'm doing this because I don't necessarily believe in rules that much, especially when it comes to music. But I will be telling you what I felt worked for me, and would ask you to just investigate those answers and take what you like. So Lauren wanted to know, she says, we discussed how it was a good idea to have a track as a reference when mixing. How would you go about finding the right track to do so with? Lauren, I know that you've been doing a lot of film scoring, and oftentimes your director or producer would give you a temp track to go with the movie. If you like that temp track, if they like that temp track, if you like the sound of it, and if it is commercially released and recorded, the chances are it sounds really good. So that would be one of the criteria for you to choose the track. Other times, if you're just composing an original piece and you are not necessarily asked to be influenced by another piece, then I would suggest that you find a piece that you yourself really like. You find a piece that you really enjoy and you feel like is mixed really well and that is in some ways similar to your own language. What do I mean by choose something in your own language? So I don't want you to choose the track from the 80s as a reference for the mix of 2020, unless you're writing a period piece. Or I don't want you to use a Baroque piece if you're writing a hip-hop piece. So stay within the area of similar aesthetic, similar time period, and similar sound. Okay, so let's talk about technically how that's done. There are several ways. Let's start from with the very simplest one, and that is basically having your track that you've mixed and bounced already imported into one track and having a reference track imported onto a second one, and basically listening to one and then another. Now, I mentioned that they should be of a similar aesthetic, so you don't want to compare things that really should not sound similar and try to make them sound similar. So because of the possible copyright issues, I did not want to use a commercially released track, but in your case, and release it here in a YouTube tutorial, because I don't have the rights to those songs and use them publicly. But for you, if you're just doing it in the privacy of your own home and you're testing your mixes against commercially released tracks, is a perfectly valid idea. I am using just a jingle song from the Apple Loops because you all will have access to those tracks if you own Logic. And they're not really similar in style, but they both use percussion and are a little folksy. Mine is Serbian, Havana is not, but there are similarities. So basically you can easily just play one and then another and compare what you're hearing. Obviously, instrumentation here is different. I only have drums in the beginning, but there's more instruments here, so you compare maybe a section. And these actually don't even sound that much different to begin with. I should have found the better genre, but or the better actually example to compare to mine. But again, I can't just go to my iTunes library because of the rights thing. So you get the idea, I think. You should always listen to your ears primarily, but there are other tools that you can call up to help your decision and guide it. Visual tools, numeric tools, meters, and such. So if we look at our mixer view, if you compare the two tracks, you can see that they're identical. The only plugins they both have is a multimeter. And if you open them both at the same time and kind of put them side by side is what I like. You can put them one at the top, one at the bottom, one at one screen, one at another, whatever suits your fancy. And if you now play them kind of together, it's going to be a little chaotic to listen to, but it will be useful as a visual aid. So I'm just going to select a portion where the instrumentation is somewhat similar. Ish. What do we notice? See, now we can not only hear, but we can also see the difference. The frequential content of both tracks, so you can analyze them even easier. Yeah, so you could see when you play them side by side like this. Yeah, so you could see that the first track has a little bit more prominent bass, but then it has sort of like it's strongest in the mids, and then the highs decay a little bit, whereas it shows a more dynamic movement in the lows and mids, or like mid lows and mids and highs in the target track. So now, of course, that is somewhat different if you're working with an existing mixed track like you have here, comparing to another finished mixed track. But what if you have a project that you're working on that has multiple tracks and it's still in the process of mixing, it's not finished yet, and you want to compare all those tracks to one track that is your goal, then the process is a little bit different. Okay, so in this next example, you have multiple tracks. I don't know how many really. 24 tracks to compare with an individual track as our goal or target. Again, the match stylistically is not perfect because I'm working with the limited resources of Apple Loops. I now know what I need to do for next time, and I'm working on it. But we're doing a track of a similar nature in a sense that there's multiple instruments, there's a lot of electronics, there's a pulse, there is a lot of processing, etc. So in this case, what we need to do is compare this one single track to 24 tracks in a project. So the way to do that is in your mix view, what I'm going to do is take all the tracks except for the reference track. which is all of these guys. And instead of leading them to stereo out, I'm going to, did I just unselect it? Yes, I did. Instead of leading them all to stereo output, I'm going to put them all on an empty auxiliary track via bus 4. So this is now my complete project. Mill track. So basically what we need to do is compare this one, which is a target track, and again, this is my terminology, I'm sure it's wrong. This is your original track, and this is the track that you're trying to sound like. Track was too loud, right? The volume is now similar between the two. This is actually, I'm going to put this one at 0. Yeah, so this can now be a little bit louder. There's more. Yeah, comparable volume. And then you could also compare them with our meters. Multimeter here and keep it open. Multimeter here and keep it open. Play them together. So in this case, in my track, you have more movement in the bass. This is looking like my tendency, pretty much strong in the middle, declining in the highs, and a little bit different dynamic through the middles here. Which method would you choose? Obviously, it's obviously easier to just compare two tracks that are finalized, because you only have 2 items to compare. But you have more flexibility comparing a work in progress work with a complete track, because you can then go back and adjust any number of tracks individually to match whatever audio picture you're trying to imitate. So I hope this is helpful. Also from Lauren, she wanted to know how to record and use your own samples. Back to Logic we go. Fairly easy. Most people don't realize that once they learn how to work with Logic loops flexibly, elastically, including an option to make your own instruments out of it, sampler instruments. The same technique can be used on anything that you record yourself, which is super useful for creating new and unusual, or new and not so unusual sounds, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm going to talk about it on an example of Logic. Which Logic am I even using? 10.4.1. I'm sure there is many updates that I still haven't done. Don't judge me. I'll do it when I upgrade my computer. Then I'll upgrade everything. Otherwise, things go crazy for me. But that's maybe a subject for another tutorial. So I know that there is a new sampler for Logic, but I am working with EXS24 for this version. So if things have shifted, we'll shift our tutorial when the time comes. But for now, we're just going to create an audio track. I'm going to call it samples. I'm going to record. What am I going to record? I know that I need some size and breath noises for the film that I'm scoring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click off the recording, the metronome, which I think is already off, and I'm just going to do it. Okay, I might have gone a little overboard with the middle one being a little weird, but that's me. Weird sounds, me equals creativity. So I have like 3 separate sound sources here, I think. Number 1, number 2, and the weird one was number 2. And number 3 was the normal one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat it as three possible samples that could be assigned to my keyboard. Obviously you can just use the sound as it is and move it around and copy paste, stretch, compress. If you need if you have questions about that, then let me know and we'll do a tutorial on that. But that is standard Logic. But what I want to also teach you how to do today is to make this into a set of keys on your keyboard so that you can play those sounds by pressing a key, which sometimes is easier than moving things around the screen, but it also enables you to transpose those sounds by playing them in a different register. There are a couple of ways to do that. The first way is I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm going to make a little cut and a little cut and a little cut and a little cut before the beginning of each sample. Then I'm going to check them because it's quite possible that I cut this too soon. See, you should cut it when you're absolutely sure there is no sound in it. That's better. You should be cutting it very close to the beginning, but not so close to the end because of the decay, which can be much longer than we see. So it's much better to leave a longer tail and let it run out than cut it too short and hear an artificial stop, which often results in a click. Second one. Good. And the third one? A little closer to the beginning. Now this one I would make a little louder so that it's closer in volume to the first two. So what I'm going to do is open it in my sample editor, which is a window in Logic. Here it is, highlighted. I will make it louder by changing its gain by about 4 decibels. Okay, 5, fine. I like to get my samples at the volume between about 30 and 80 out of 100% scale. You will hear different opinions on it, and again, there may be another tutorial. This works for me. These are supposed to be soft-ish samples, so I don't want to blast them too high, but I also don't want them to be too quiet, because by amplifying them artificially afterwards, you would raise the noise floor, which we don't necessarily want. I do want them to be similar. If you're doing a sequence of similar sounds, they should have similar volumes, because the chances are you're going to use them in the same track with the same type of intention. It's a similar layer of your music, and they should be balanced out. So we did that by amplifying the last one in a sequence. We're now going to close this, and the next step is highlighting all of them. Select all of them, control click in one of them while all selected, and choose the function that is going to be under convert, and you're going to say convert to new sampler track. Now it's available for me also at the top of my menu because I used it recently, but for you it might not be. So go to convert, go to the third one, third option down, and choose that and let it think. You're going to tell it to start from middle C. I'm fine with that. And basically it asks you how you want to treat those samples, and we want to assign them by regions. Regions are these separate 3 samples that are already created out of longer ones. Sorry, Mike. And we'll talk about transient markers in a second. And then you are going to just give it trigger note, fine. Creates instrument with 3 zones, maximum 15 for 3 regions, including a MIDI trigger region. Okay. There we go. So to just explain this view, this sample now became this note on this instrument. This sample became this note on this instrument, and this sample became this note on that instrument. This instrument is EXS24, which is a sampler, and it was just created by this function of converting audio files to new sampler track. And if you open the edit view for that newly created instrument, you will see this. And now you can play them by just playing your keyboard, just like any instrument. What I like even more than just being able to play them on the keyboard is that this method gives you ability to transpose those sounds. You can play chords. Similarly, I hope you can hear that. And then you can overlap them as well. So that concludes today's video. I hope that you found it useful. It took forever, to be quite honest, but it is the first time that I'm doing this, so I did expect it to take quite a while. And if you know me, you know that I don't like to over prepare. I like to jump straight into the action. So hopefully that will prove to be useful in this series for you, and I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to receiving your questions. Again, you can ask anything regarding music tech, film scoring, or general composition questions, and I hope to get to your questions in one of the following weeks. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.